It is finally here. I'm really excited about this. The carbon fiber upgrade chassis kit from DSM Off-Road for the Redcat Ascent. Just icing on the cake, high clearance sliders here on the side. We're going to be doing a couple little baseline tests with the truck as it sits first. Then we're going to show you the process of swapping this chassis over, any kind of hiccups or any kind of issues that we run into along the way, and then doing a test afterwards to see how much better has it gotten. Let's get started with some of these baseline tests. Now, unfortunately, it is about to get dark outside, and I am way too impatient to wait for this for tomorrow. So we're going to do a couple tests here inside the garage. First is, what is the truck total weigh, and what is the front and rear weight balance? Second, I'm going to try to kind of mimic side hilling. So I'm going to put the truck on a board and see at what angle does the truck topple over, and that's going to give us that baseline. Swap the chassis over, test those things again. Stock weight with no battery in it, but the modifications that I have already done to the truck, we are looking at just under 3,000 grams, so 2966 with a 60-40 weight balance. 1779 on the front, 1187 on the rear. For mimicking a side hill test, we're going to just simply put the tires of the truck right here on the edge of the board, and we're going to put an angle finder right here next to the truck. Then we're going to just continue to tilt this board up until the truck actually tips over, and we'll see what kind of difference we get. So that's up to about 30 degrees, 35, 40. I'm hitting the cabinets, 45 degrees. We're still looking solid. This is all going to come crashing down miserably, isn't it? 50 degrees. Still going. Oh my gosh, 50 degrees. Oh, tire's starting to lift right there. All right, so right about 50 degrees. From the test that I just did, you can probably assume what I think the benefits of this chassis are going to be. One, we're reducing weight up high, which means side hill and things like that should be better. Second is just reducing total weight. It turns out, fat guys like me, it's harder for us to go up a hill than it is for skinny folks. We just have more gravity working against us, and that's what I want to eliminate out of my crawler as well. So I tend to focus all adding weight up low and up front and keeping everything else lightweight. That's exactly what I think this chassis will do. Yes, there may be other benefits to this chassis as well. If they change some things like the skid angle and some things like that, also can help with overall chassis dynamics and performance, and that's going to be a little bit hard to show right here on the workbench. Here's all of what you get with this Rock Warrior chassis kit. Good instructions over here to give you an idea of where all this stuff goes. 4 alternate body mounts so that you can actually mount a different style body, but it will also work with the factory body mounts as well. A hardware kit so you can have some additional hardware for putting this together. Obviously the chassis rails themselves, and then a carbon fiber motor mount. All of this part of the kit. And of course, here's where some of the other changes come to the overall kit. You get different shock mounting options both front and rear to help you tune your suspension. And the lower skid here has an even deeper angle in it to help with clearance and getting up and over obstacles. Really interested to see how this looks. This is a nice carbon fiber weave. It claims a 3mm carbon fiber weave, and that is what I measure it out to. Nice and solid. I see no issues with the lamination or anything, no burring of the holes. Looks like, however it was cut very nicely. I'm going to come in here. I have a lot of wires zip tied up to the edge of the truck here, so clearly I need to get all of those out now. And then if it touches the factory frame, we need to get it off. So the side skids need to come off, the center skid here and the, needs to come off, obviously the motor mount, all of this stuff, even the shocks. But I'm going to try to see how much of this I can do all as kind of one piece. So I'm going to get the shocks, the top shocks off. I'm going to start getting some of these other components off, and then we're going to one by one move them over to the new chassis. With the shocks disconnected, it gives you a whole lot more freedom to move everything around. I'm going to now go in through these holes on these skids in order to get the whole center skid and these side plates off. The thing I'm going to really pay attention to here is the mounting locations. So these rear links mount up and just barely back from the mounting screws of the skid. And the front is up here a pretty good amount, and it's in the higher position. If I lay the new skid here next to it, it looks like they give you more options right here in the rear and maybe very similar options in the front, but actually even maybe allows it to go even higher depending on how you look at it. So this is a good opportunity to sit here. I'm going to mimic the geometry of the factory truck as much as possible to start with, and then obviously these are tuning options that we have later. On the front axle, I removed the steering linkage from the servo horn and the panhard rod here from the mount on the chassis. I'll have to be moving some of that stuff, of course, over later, but this gets us a good start. I'm going to start the assembly with the center skid, and of course the dowel lines just line up beautifully right there. Now I could choose to use the same factory skids that come with it, and that will bolt in beautifully, but DSM also does have these lower profile ones, which if you're not planning on running a big battery here on the side, you can see they are much lower profile, especially out here to the edges. Hopefully get you around a few more of those rocks, and it looks like I can reuse the factory hardware to install these, which is great. And looky there, already looking so much better. Definitely making some progress here. I am going to say this is a good opportunity for you to double check. We have this big kick up right here for the front, straighter parts right here in the rear. Make sure that you have the right stuff pointed the right direction. It's a good time now to double check and make sure that everything really is lining up correctly, and you don't accidentally have the chassis on backwards or something like that. And there we go. All 4 links in the rear, all 3 links in the front are all now mounted up. It's a good opportunity now to go ahead and put the motor mount in, because you can still flex the chassis a little bit and get it in there without any issue. I assume it copies the factory mount, which has the bulge to the bottom. That'll help actually lower the motor as well, so I assume that is how that goes in there. This is an interesting little twist. Turns out you can't actually get the shocks mounted all the way back there, especially on this side, because down in here the lower shock cap hits the panhard rod right here, and so it actually cannot angle back enough to get into this rear shock position, and honestly even in the front shock position it kind of wants to hit. Checking on the instructions, it's actually one of the drawings that they call out in the instructions is they want you to move the shock from the top of the axle back here around the side to right above the front links, and actually mount the shocks that way instead. Now, unfortunately, moving these shocks is not super straightforward because of how Redcat assembles this. You actually have to take the wheel off, and you have to, at minimum, loosen up this hub, both top and bottom pieces here. You have to get in here with a 1.5, and you take this screw out here, and then the shock can come out, and they want you to mount it down here with the supplied hardware that they provide down in that location. And here you can see how they want you to mount it. So now this is mounted back up. You can see the screw that this is where the shock had previously been mounted. Now it's mounted to the outside of this lower link mount on the upper side here, and it gives you a little spacer, and the screw's long enough with a nut on the other side, and now you have plenty of room to be able to get back to that shock mount position. And there is the front shocks now also mounted. Is all the way back and all the way up. Is it too low? It might be now, when you got to consider everything else that needs to still mount in here and the motor and everything. I don't know if it's going to give us a whole bunch of down travel. I feel as if the suspension's a little bit in a bind. We may end up needing to lower this shock mount to raise that chassis up a little bit just to get everything to feel correctly in here. We're going to turn our attention first though to the rear, and the rear they want a very similar thing. They want you to move the shock from this position to down here, again with the standoff, so that it can be outside of the chassis rails there. That is what we're going to work on now. I got the motor started over here. Now when it comes to this spur and slipper assembly, you do have to take it apart, so be very careful with the order of things as you take it apart in order to get to the 4 screws back here that mount it up. Alright, as a reminder for how you put all this back on, so we have a metal plate along with one of the slipper plates. That's going to go on first. Make sure it keys in nicely. Then you have the actual spur gear itself, and it comes with it has its own slipper material and plate. Make sure that all gets keyed in correctly. Then you have these conical washers and the nut. And I'll show you a picture here of how tight mine was from the factory, and obviously I'm just going to be replicating something similar to that same amount of tension here. This is cool. It's almost coming together here now. So everything mounted up, I will say they do move the motor and everything a little bit closer to the front here than we have from the factory. So I'm gonna have to double check my battery. I think I had a little bit more clearance in here before, so we're gonna have to make sure if there's anything here that I need to protect. I've been considering 3D printing a new battery tray right here anyway, something with a like a kick up right here to protect my battery just in case. So maybe this is going to spur me on to go ahead and do that and make that mount. At the end of the day, the good news here, everything here bolted back in absolutely like it does from the factory. No issues. Pan hard mount goes on, everything bolted up just beautifully, and now with the shocks in this new position, they also clear very nicely. All right, and there we go. The rear parts of the car all also bolt up just absolutely beautiful. This is a good time to give a huge shout out to Rob at DSM. He did a great job at making sure that all the holes and everything bolted up absolutely perfectly. I had no issues at all with anything lining up. Literally just set something in place and it bolted down. That was awesome. Everything is now mounted up. It looks great. We're going to make sure that the body does in fact go on still, because we have changed some of the dimensions here. I'm hitting something, it hits these side skids, and then just like that, we are down. It looks like I might need to adjust my front and rear suspension height a little bit. That rear is sitting all the way down there on the on the body itself, so might need to cock those shocks up a little bit, gain some height back out there in the rear, but we can do that another time. We are going to weigh it and do that side hill test like we started with, see what difference we've made. Moment of truth with the weight, 2717. So that is a total of 250 grams lighter than what this truck was at the beginning, which is, I mean, I'll be honest, that's approaching 10%-ish of the total weight that we just took out of this truck. That is a huge deal for sure. Also noticed a little bit of a weight shift front and rear. I think that's just percentage wise, because when I do the math as far as how much the front and rear weight both went down, they both went down about the same amount, but then you're dividing that over a lower number, so hence about 1% shift that happened front and rear. Now let's get to the angle measurement. When we did this before, we were somewhere in that 50 to 55 degree range, so we're just going to go straight up over there again. So there's 50. At the 50, I still see the rear tire starting to get lightweight. All right, as we go, what do I see? We're at 55 solid. No movement at 55, so that's already better. Oh, there it goes. All right, so right as I got close to 60 degrees is when it finally went. So a slight improvement in the side hilling. Last couple things that I'm going to do to this truck, I'll do it off camera again. I'm going to tweak with the rear suspension a little bit, make sure that I actually have some suspension to give before it hits the rear tires. So we're going to have to mess with that a little bit. Obviously there's still some tuning that can be done to the whole vehicle now with this different chassis in it, different link mounting positions and all that. That could be a whole different separate subject. Quick point of clarification here on the skids. So how I have them installed, yeah, that's actually wrong, as it turns out. They're not supposed to be on this kind of angle. I thought it was, because then as you come over a rock, like it'd be more likely to help you slide over the rock. Nope, turns out that's actually wrong. If you're curious what it looks like with the factory skid, then it would be more in this direction right here. Actually still matches the chassis quite nicely. But Rob over there at DSM, he is still working on other stuff, including a different version of his skid that does actually raise up a little bit and still includes a battery strap in case you're wanting to run your batteries on the side, not up at the front like what I do. How these are supposed to be is actually swapped side to side, so I'm going to do that real quick and show you what it looks like. These swapped to where they actually should be in the first place, then all of a sudden you have a nice curved leading edge here, not that blunt edge that I was concerned about before. Initially, I didn't have access to all three of these screw holes, and I wondered kind of why that was. Well, gee, it's because you're supposed to when you have the skid in the right spot. So it's dark outside right now. Wait just a second. Let's wait till daytime. Very cold, first thing here in the morning. Still like near freezing. So if the tires don't have a lot of traction this morning, you're gonna have to give them a little bit of a break, a little bit of grace. But I'm gonna hit a few obstacles here on the backyard course that I think are gonna really show the difference in the brake over, the difference in front balance, the difference in up high weight versus what we had before. So I'm gonna go straight to those and point them out to you as we hit them. This first, honestly, not too challenging of an obstacle depending on how you hit it, but if you come up over here to the right here, the last time I drove this truck up it, a lot of front tire up in the air. It went up it, but it was definitely something you wanted to approach slow. So let's see how it does now. Look at that. That front stayed planted the whole time. Wow, that is much different, actually. I tested this obstacle a bunch as I was putting the Furatech system in it, and that front end would go sky high every time. Oh, now we're getting a little bit of raise. This time we're getting a little bit of a raise. Let's see. We'll lay down. Yep, not a problem. Second obstacle is these craggy rocks, and a lot of times going up and over it, the rear end would get hung on it. So let's see how it does today. Not a problem. Not a problem at all. Straight over it. Now on this twist bridge, if there's any kind of a top weight on the truck at all, coming over this last hump here can be a real challenge. Let's see what it does. That was absolutely ridiculous. That went over both of those so much easier than it would have before. Now this doesn't look challenging, but this is a place where a lot of trucks do get hung up. It's just pretty craggy right here coming on and off of this wood. Sometimes as you come down through here, get hung up. Let's see what happens. The truck's doing really, really good, honestly. It's just a little bit better than it was before, right? Is it absolute, like, monster game changer? Not that I can tell so far, but does it do better? Yes. There's a couple obstacles in the front yard that I want to hit, so let's go out there and see what happens. Back from the test drive. And of course, the big question that everybody wants to know is it better? Is it better than it was with the factory chassis? Yeah, it really is. The extra angle with the skid, the lighter weight, no brainer. It's just basic physics. The truck is better than it was before. The other question, though, is it worth the $100, and is it a radical transformation? I would definitely spend the $100 on it all the time. It is very precisely cut. It bolts up just absolutely beautifully. You know, the only potential slight kind of pain point is having to move the shocks where they mount on the axle compared to where they were before. Otherwise, it's a very basic, straightforward swap over that takes, I don't know, it took me 30 minutes or an hour while videoing it and everything like that to take like 10% of the weight off the truck. That and up high weight off the truck, that is again a no-brainer to me. Any weight you can get out of the high end of these vehicles really helps a lot, and this does that for a reasonable price. But I will say, it doesn't like transform the vehicle. If we took 10% of the weight out, that means we left 90% of it the same. So for the bulk of it, the vehicle is still the same vehicle that it was before, and you're going to also get a bunch of different benefit out of shock tuning, link placement, things along those lines. Stuff that I haven't done yet to this truck. At this point, this truck is still stock modified, right? Like, it's got some brass, it's got a different motor and ESC in it, but otherwise from like a link perspective, from a shock perspective, it's still stock. So there's still some benefits to be had out of some of those, and that's what I'm going to be working on with this truck next. But if you're looking for an easy way to get a bunch of weight out of your truck, and to get performance to be improved just that little bit compared to where it was before, this is an absolute no-brainer. I think it's 100% worth it, and there's more to come. So, thank you for watching. If you have any questions about what I did, leave them down in the video comments below, and I'll be happy to answer them. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you, and goodbye.